Good evening, all. I think, first of all, as an introduction, I'll have to go through my own little odyssey, what brought me here today. Come from a Republican background. Father was a member of the Fianna Fáil party. I was a member of the Fianna Fáil party, which makes this particularly, in a way, almost masochistic. I share cousins with the Pierce brothers. My mother's older sister married a cousin of the Pierces, so my first cousins are related to the Pierce family. I come from the Hylands, or Hylands as they're known in South Tipperary and North Waterford, or the same as Wheel and Phelan of the Daishes. My mother's McCarthy from just West Ovens. But behind that are Blackburns, Bradfields, Haynes, and assorted other Anglo-Saxons. We blame all our problems on the English, but I often think that if it weren't for them ruffians who came over to Bag-and-Bun in 1169 or thereabouts, that none of us would have an existence. This place would be empty today, because they bred us. Now, I spent 3 existences in England, where I was very welcomed. As I mentioned, I was a member of the Tory party and stood as a candidate in local elections unsuccessfully. Actually, I was shoved in as an agent provocateur to keep the socialists busy in other constituencies. And I did in the early 50s. I went there first in 1952 during college holidays, having just done my leaving cert. Spent 4 months in London. Went back in 57. Spent 13 years, came back with the neighbour's child, who is still my partner. And, I like England. I like the English. I'm, as I say, Bradfield, Haynes, Blackburn. My father was very disgusted to find that the Blackburns were actually Cromwellians. He never believed that there was such breeding came from his paternal grandmother. But to get down to CO 762, Andy, I'm a man of one source, unfortunately. 762, in about 2011, a friend and acquaintance whom I'd known for many years had prepared a work on the burnt houses of Cork. That gives his name away, Jim Donnelly. And we knew Jim in North Cork when we lived there, and he was preparing his Land and People of Cork in the 19th century. And when we moved here, he had a holiday home in Skibbereen, known, I'm sure, to some of you. But anyway, Jim gave me this text to read on the burnt houses, and I made emendations. I gave him notes on some things that I was familiar with in North Cork, some things that I was familiar with in West Cork, which expanded. And when he published the article, he gave me credit for giving him some help. God bless him. But in footnotes, there were mentions of CO 762. And it took me a while to find out what CO 762. I'm not a researcher. I'm a retired bookseller. I was able to do research on books, so a certain amount of it came handy. And I discovered that it was a document, Colonial Office 762, file of 200 boxes, 3,632 claims, at least claim numbers. There were a few missing from that, and there were in total 3,601 claims. We spent some weeks at various times in Kew, in the National Archive in Kew, going through these claims. Joan photographed we reckon with discards and everything, we've over 20,000 photographs taken of these documents in Kew. A lot of them have been scrapped because they were bad quality. But then we brought them home, and I analysed each one of them, sorted them out. When our middle daughter Niamh, who's quite good with computers, she set up an Excel database in which we have them, their box numbers, file numbers within the box, names, addresses, and a brief resume of each claim, so that we've done various subdivisions since, and tossing and playing with the numbers. Number crunching, I think, is the modern word for it. But so we've come up with this document based on these 3,601. It actually expands to over 4,000 because you've got people from Cork who moved to Donegal or somewhere like that, or people from Andy's home territory of Tullow. It's on the borders with Wicklow, and although the postal address is Tullow, the civil address is Wicklow. So we had to have two entries if somebody was approaching us from Tullow, County Carlow, or from the townland in County Wicklow, so that it expands to 4,060 individual entries. CO 762, that is a brief overview. It was set up in 1922 to look after, to provide assistance, financial assistance to Irish refugees after the truce. And it was amended in 1923 to include people who had property damaged in that period and may not have migrated. Then it was renewed. It was supposed to die in about 25, but it was renewed to cover up to 1926, events up to 1926. And it was also known as in some places commonly known as the Wood Renton Committee. And it took evidence up until 1930. There were a few in 1930, but it virtually was closed at that stage. And the information I took out of Cork was used in the recent publication. Charlie Roach, who did the mapping, did an analysis of Cork for the Atlas of the Revolution, published by Cork University Press. And as you will see from this, this is the West Cork and Cork City area, and it is quite littered. There is an extension to it that is not showing there down the Beara. Down the Mizzen. And again, there was quite a bit in the Mizzen. I'm not dealing, by the way, with mortalities as such. I'm dealing with interference with people. I subdivided Cork into four areas. You've got the city, which is just the environs. East Cork, North Cork, and West Cork. And as will appear from that map, West Cork was a particular hotspot. Cork City, well, you'll expect that in with a population of over 100,000 in the environs. But the situation in the other place that we looked at in comparison with it, but it is a very different situation, is County Clare. And I was very fortunate to have related through marriage, a young man, Adrian Donnelly, who went through the Clare population. We'll move on from that. Now, that is a table that my daughter in the UK sorted out. The blue line at the bottom represents 849 claims in Cork. The next one above it is 360 claims in Clare. Next is Laois with 317, followed by Tipperary with 313, and Dublin with only 267. Now, Clare is peculiar and has got to be kept out of this. I was disappointed that David Fitzpatrick was unable to be here. Clare was largely people. There was Adrian identified for me that 90% of the claimants in Clare were Roman Catholics. 10% were non-Catholic or didn't give information. But that is explained by the fact that Henry Valentine McNamara, who was one of the largest landowners in County Clare, was a paternalistic landlord. And as a paternalist, his tenants and his workers were all his family. So when he was run out of the country by the IRA in 1920, the people were leaderless, jobless, and homeless. So they had claims, but unfortunately, Clare, because it happened before the commission sat for events that happened after the truce, July the 11th, midnight July the 11th, 1921. Most of the Clare stuff happened in 1920 when McNamara was kicked out by the IRA. So it was marked NS, which was not within or OS, not within the scope of the committee, or rejected. So Cork is very much on its own. And in Cork, the breakdown that we have come up with in the various parts of the county, claims-wise, is that the whole of the county, 62.5% of the claims were from non-Catholics. In West Cork, it was 71%. And in the rest of the county, it was 53%. So that it indicates that it certainly was far from the 10 to 90% in Clare. Laois, which was third, has the what's the place that there was a book in there, oh God, senility. It was an area in Laois where a lot of, I discovered Luggacorn, I discovered afterwards that the causes of the problem there was that there were people were brought down to replace the landholders, the tenants in the 1870s, 1880s, because the local landlords were fed up with the land league, dealing with the land league, could get little or no sense out of them, and they kicked out a lot of them and brought these down. So it resurrected itself in the 1920s when the government came in, when the Free State government came in. But sorry, this looked a lot easier to do when I had it written out. But is 90% of the population of Cork in the 1911 census, 90% of the population was Roman Catholic, 10% was non-Catholic, or wasn't giving any information. That I did that from that table, partly from the admissions and partly from the referees. The two TAGTs are an old Irish expression, Taiga Gahave. They had a Roman Catholic priest and a Protestant rector, vicar as the referees. But that gives an indication of the with and without the forces, because the forces is allowed as an element in some of the interferences. The RIC came in for a lot of problems. A lot of them were refused any assistance because they had got a gratuity when they were disbanded. And that should have covered removal costs and various other ones. But there were, what I came across in Cork, particularly in West Cork. East Cork was largely small shopkeepers in military towns who were boycotted because they sold cigarettes and chocolates and sweets to the military forces. The same applies largely in North Cork. Cork City is highly various and you can't really categorise it. But a lot of what happened in West Cork was what you can only call intimidation. There were 380 of the 450 West Cork claims. 360 of them were from non-Catholics. And they covered assorted 67. Now, some of these overlap. 67 of them were levied for money. And in some cases, they refused to pay money for the arms for the IRA. Most of this, by the way, as you will gather from the fact that it's post-truce, is going to be the forces of the Republic, the anti-treaty forces in West Cork. And as I said, it makes it an almost masochistic journey for myself, having grown up in nationalist Republican ambience, to finish up looking at this and feeling very hurt. But there were 67 were levied for monies for arms and what have you, and in some cases, when they did not take up the levies, or when they did not pay the levies, their property was damaged. Some stock was taken, furniture was taken, various other things. 91 of them were billeted on. Now, this is the case of a woman, Alicia Bevan, who lived up in the backwoods beyond Dunmanway. And Alicia was a retired domestic servant in her 40s, living alone, spinster. And a dozen of the boys arrived in demanding bed, breakfast, and concealment overnight from the force of the government. This is what a claim file looks like, actually. That is the cover of the file. This is the first page, which gives her name and where she was. She had then moved into Dunmanway town because it was untenable. September the 20th, 1921. That's 3 months, 4 months after, 3 months after the truce. 13 men came to my house at Carrigakillihy, Coolcaloor, 4 miles distant from Dunmanway, and with threats demanded supper and beds for the night. Now you can imagine the effect of that on a 40-year-old retired domestic servant who thought she might have more relaxed times to come in her retirement. Her state was, she had left Carrickscully in June 26 and rented a small house in Quarry Road in Dunmanway and took in a lodger who pays part of her rent. He pays £7 a month. The next one we look at is, that is a letter that was a reference that was given for her by Richard Hodges, who was treasurer of the diocese. He was a clergyman of the Church of Ireland. Then we have Jeremy Kingston, who was living in Tawneys and Clonakilty. Jeremy was 64, a Protestant farmer residing near Clonakilty. These are just samples. There are 4 samples here of what was happening. He had property, and on 16th of March 1923, the dwelling house on his lands was partially destroyed by fire. For this he was awarded, this is another problem that arose, he was awarded £475 in the court, but the Free State would only pay £250 and 16 shillings. Then we have he was unmarried, and he lived with his 2 unmarried sisters who were both in their 60s. So a lot of what happened in rural areas, people out in the sticks. They get these fellows coming in late at night, armed, in a lot of cases masked, an attempt to frighten them. 57 were exiled, some of them temporary, some of them permanent, and 182 were robbed of cash, stock, machinery and furniture. So it was certainly an unwelcoming experience for these people. I mean, I could show you more of these files, but they're basically the same thing. So we'll just get down to that is a chart of the divisions of the attacks on people and the difference in the percentage of attacks on Roman Catholics are in red on the top. In the Cork City area, 36.1% of them were on Roman Catholics. The remaining were obviously non-Catholics, 64%, 48% in East Cork, so there was a majority of Catholics were being interfered with. There was a majority of non-Catholics interfered with there, 43% in North Cork. 18.5% of the claims in West Cork were on Roman Catholics, which left over 80% on people either non-Catholics or not prepared to give information. And that comes down to these claims. I've worked out that in Cork City, if one was a Protestant or non-Catholic, one in 158 chance of being interfered with. In the East County, 1 in 75. In the North County, 1 in 68. And in West Cork, if you were non-Catholic, 1 in 33 was your chances of being interfered with by the boys. So I think I'll cut out now and stop boring you. As I finished it here, I was looking at an advertisement for West Cork, and I think that West Cork in the 1920s was a place apart, but for the wrong reasons.